students to the massive open online course on Indian Economy 1. Today we are going to discuss the import substitution and export promotion under Unit 1. Now, after completing this module, you will be able to understand the meaning of import substitution and export promotion. Also, we will know the advantages and burdens of import substitution, and again, we will also be able to assess the impact of both these strategies on the Indian economy. So, the plan of discussion is like this. So, firstly, after introduction, we will discuss the import substitution, also with its rationale. Then we will introduce the instruments of import substitution, and again we will go for the burdens of import substitution. Then after discussing the exports promotion and a critical evaluation of this strategy, we will briefly compare these two development strategies for the Indian economy, and then we will conclude. So now, to start with, we must know that import substitution and export promotion are two development strategies particularly targeting the balance of payment equilibrium or the stabilization of balance of payment. These policies are applicable in the restricted trade regime, and most of the developing countries during their initial phase of development adopted these kinds of restrictive trade because free trade at the initial path of their development may not be beneficial for the developing countries because of the huge differences between the developing and the advanced world, at least in terms of industrialization. So, for India also, both these strategies were adopted, that is import substitution and export promotion during its pre-reform era. And India particularly adopted these two strategies in a phase-wise manner. Firstly, it adopted the import substitution. Then from 1970s, it started to emphasize on the export promotion strategies. Now, along with the stabilization of BOP, the important motive behind these two strategies was the industrialization. Now, by import substitution policy, policymakers tried to change the structure of the economy from an agrarian to the industrial one. This was the first step towards industrialization or the economic development, because we know in terms of modern economics, by economic development we mean that material increase of the well-being, and this can only be increased through industrialization. Through this strategy of import substitution, a country tried to produce substitutes of a wide range of foreign goods in the domestic economy. And in case of India's import substitution policy, India firstly tried to produce a wide range of consumer goods. Then its focus shifted to the production of intermediate to capital goods. And finally, in the third stage of import substitution, India also tried to change its technology from the foreign to the indigenous one. Now, the country followed the path of import substitution not only in the industrial sector but also in the agricultural sector to achieve self-reliance. During the initial years of development after independence, particularly the first 2 to 3 5-year plans, it is estimated that 25% of the economic growth in India was due to the contribution of this import substitution strategy. Also, it contributed to about 50% of total capital goods production during the same period. And these kind of findings we can also have for the Japanese economy, which followed the import substitution during 1914 to 1954. And they experienced a profound increase in their manufacturing base with the policy of import substitution. Now, coming to the rationale behind import substitution, why should we adopt this kind of strategies? Now, if a developing country try to start their process of industrialization, it must rely on the import restrictions, at least during the first phases of industrialization. Here we should keep in our mind that import substitution is not synonymous to import restrictions. Import substitution has a broader objective, while import restrictions is only a part of it. During the early phases of development, we can say that import restriction is a precondition of the import substitution. This is because the structure of our world economy is not uniform in nature. We have some countries which are much more developed in terms of capital accumulation, in terms of technology, in terms of industrialization than the other. And also the technology for industries are such that in general they exhibit increasing return to scale. So it is difficult for a newly formed industry to compete with the existing one. So, with increasing return to scale in production, distribution, transportation, per unit cost of the products of the industrial world is definitely lower than the newly formed industries of the developing world. This is also true because of the technical advancement, mechanization, high degree of concentrated capital that the advanced countries can enjoy. So, under import substitution strategy, protection was given based on the infant industry argument. A new industry is being protected to establish them in a level playing field of world competition. We will not need import restrictions when our focus will be on export promotion of these newly formed import substituting industries. And along with the expansion of domestic industries, import substitution additionally can reduce our reliance on the foreign countries for our consumption purpose. It can create more employment, and which is a very necessary condition for a country like us where the population growth is very high. And we can also reduce the requirement of foreign currency for the consumption purpose, and we can use those scarce resources for the other developmental projects. So we can expect an improvement in the balance of payment with the adoption of the import substituting strategy. Now, what were the instruments of import substitution? So tariff and quota are the most widely used instruments for the import substitution. Tariff is a tax on the imported goods. It can be imposed on the unit of import or the volume of import, while quota is a specified amount that a country can import, and generally it is lower than the free trade amount of import. Licensing is another tool to give protection to the domestic producers. And these tools are used to limit the foreign supply in the domestic economy to create a competitive edge between the domestic price and the international price. And this is basically the most effective incentive to the domestic producers. And the government also manipulate the exchange rate, interest rate, or the prices of the intermediate inputs to support the domestic industries during the regime of import substitution. But there are some burdens of this strategy also. India's strategy particularly failed to generate a competitive industrial structure. Instead, it gave rise to an inefficient, rent-seeking, bureaucratic economic structure. And in such a structure, a significant amount of productive resources are getting diverted for the wasteful activities like rent-seeking, bribing, lobbying, etc. And after its initial success, the import substitution policy soon started to reflect its inefficiency, inability to promote economic growth, increasing per capita income, qualitative improvements of the products, reaping the benefits of increasing return, launching new products through research and development at the industrial level, adopting new technologies, etc. In almost all fields of industrial development, it started to show its inefficiency. And actually, under this system, the economy gets stagnant under red tapeism. So again, with the absence of foreign competition and rampant corruption gave rise to a monopolistic domestic structure with the domestic producers. And this resulted not only in the inefficiency in the resource allocation, but also this system failed to increase the output at the socially optimal level. And naturally, the problem of unemployment is not solved with this lower level of production. Similarly, import substitution strategy couldn't help the country to solve the problem of foreign exchange scarcity. Rather, it necessitates massive import to support its drive towards production more of the intermediate outputs or the capital goods. So during that time, the exchange rate was also overvalued to support these kinds of massive import. So we can say that the import substitution policy taken together actually acted as a negative incentive to the export sector of the economy. So with this dual problem, that is increasing import and decreasing export, the scarcity of foreign exchange gets intensified under the import substitution regime. So with this policy, to sustain economic growth, the country had to rely on the huge kinds of borrowing to support not only the current account balance but also the government budget. So actually these gives rise to another profound problem of debt unsustainability. Now coming to the export promotion. The immediate motive was to increase the export earnings as the import substituting policy severely failed to protect the country from the problem of scarcity of foreign exchange. But in this case also another motive was to create a competitive industrial structure within the economy. Various instruments or measures were taken in India to promote its exports, particularly from 1970s. The argument of infant industry is not limited to the import substitution only. For export promotion, we also need a careful designing of promotive measures to the selected areas where we would like to increase our competitive edge. And following are some of the promotional measures that India took during 1970s. The cash compensatory support. This was introduced in 1966 and was abolished in 1991. This was a kind of compensation to exporters for higher freight rate, indirect taxes on imports and market development cost. By the 1980s, its cover rose almost to 40% of the total import. Then the duty drawback system was also introduced, and under this policy, the aim was to raise the competitiveness of India's export by lowering the input cost. It was a kind of reimbursement for the tariff and other domestic excise duties paid on the inputs. Then the replenishment license were also introduced. These measures were designed to give exporters a license to import some necessary raw materials. And advanced licensing and the duty exemption scheme gave the exporters the permission to import duty-free for confirmed export orders. Then export processing zones were also set up. This is a scheme to make Indian export more competitive by allowing the import of all required imports, including plants, machineries, equipments and material for manufacturing exportables without any duty. And export promotions councils were also set up, and under these councils, many activities were taken up to promote export, including participation in trade fairs, establishing offices in the foreign countries, market and product research, publicity, etc. Along with these, many export incentives were also given, like tax exemption on the export earning, retainment of a certain amount of foreign exchange by the exporters for the purpose of their export promotion, etc. Now, many organizations were also established to promote exports and mainly to implement the export promotion measures of India. And these includes commodity boards, export houses, the Federation of Packaging, the Export Credit and Guarantee Corporation of India, the Trade Fair Authority of India, the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, etc. State trade corporations was also set up to facilitate trade with the socialist countries in particular, and minerals and metal trading corporations were established to promote the exports of mineral oils and metals. But in this case also, if we critically evaluate these measures, we can say that these measures or the export promotion strategy as a whole was very ad hoc in nature, and it was not integrated with the domestic, industrial or even economic planning, industrial policy or the economic planning. And even for agricultural exports, serious technological development through research was necessary to increase the productivity and to meet the new age world demand. The products were needed to mold to fit the changing world demand. India faced a declining share of its primary export even in the periods of active export promotion. Though some of the problems that India faced during that period was out of control of the domestic government. And the main external problems at that time were, first, the continuous deterioration of the terms of trade of the agricultural products due to its income inelastic nature. Then change in the technology and growth of the synthetic substitutes of these products, change in the pattern of the consumption of the advanced world, and also particularly various tariff and non-tariff measures that were imposed on India's or other developing countries' exportables. Now, for all these reasons, along with the intense competition with the other developing country, India's share in world export of primary products declined. Now, policymakers identifying these kinds of problem in the primary product export basically gave their emphasis on the export promotion strategy, during the export promotion strategy on the manufacturing export. Again, rising domestic demand and the inflationary pressure in the domestic economy made the export unattractive and also difficult. So, in this case, government measures to increase the agricultural productivity on a pan-India basis through substantial investment in research and development, quality checking, mechanization, and removing the fragmentation of landholding, cooperative farming, rural connectivity, etc., could have done better if integrated with the export promotion strategy. Now, knowing the problems of increasing agricultural exports, the policymakers' main emphasis during the export promotion period was on the manufacturing output or its exports. And being a marginal exporter, these promotional measures didn't attract any countermeasures from either from the trading partners or from the other competitors. And in case of manufacturing products, through various schemes and incentives, India successfully increased its share in engineering goods from merely 2.1% in 1960-61 to 12% by the 1990-91. However, this much of success cannot make the India's export promotion policy a successful one. There was serious problem in the manufacturing sectors also, and some problems were external and some were the internal problem. So, if we first look at the external problem, we can see that the developed countries, to protect their industries, always impose tariff and different non-tariff barriers to the developing world's export. And notably, the problem of tariff escalation is created actually a massive hindrance to the developing world's export. In the developed world, the tariff structure is such that it increases when we move from the agriculture to the manufacturing products. That is, in that kind of system, chocolate faces more tariffs than the cocoa. So, the manufacturing products of developing countries lose its competitive edge in that structure. India also faced difficulty in exporting manufacturing outputs towards the developed world, and also it failed to increase its manufacturing export to the developing world because they also adopted import substitution policy as India did. Now, if we come to the domestic problem, the main problem was outdated technology. Both government and private sector showed its reluctance to update the technology and improve the quality of the products. It also lost in terms of efficiency or productivity due to these kinds of obsolete technology. There was little incentive or effort to invest in research and development at the industrial level. A relatively large domestic market with government protection and a protection particularly from the foreign competition can be the cause of such reluctance. However, the world during this phase changed leaps and bounds in terms of technological advancement. The advanced world's plants not only become more productive with technical advancements, but their products also became qualitatively more superior and even in nature. However, the quality of India's exports remained poor and uneven, so that it actually during that period faced a high rejection rate. So now we can compare with the success and failures of both the development strategies, the import substitution and the export promotion. Their desirability as an optimal strategy depends on the state and condition of the economy. However, we can compare their effects on various aspects of the economy, at least for the short run. Now, if we think in terms of employment generation, we can say that the export promotion strategy has the similar effects as the import substitution policy, particularly in the short run. Now, what happened in the long run would depend on their own viability. When our consideration is the foreign exchange earning and efficiency gain, we can definitely say that the export promotion policy is a better choice because import substitution cannot generate a new avenues of foreign exchange earning by its own. Also, efficiency gain is an integral part of the export promotion strategy. While under import substitution, guaranteed government protection, irrespective of the efficiency level, indirectly providing an incentive for the industries to be underutilized. An export promotion strategy is also better for reaping the benefits of economies of scale because the expansion of the import substituting industries are limited by the expansion of the domestic market only. Now, export promotion strategy is much more oriented towards the comparative advantage of the economy. But here we should keep in our mind that most of the developing strategies through their export promotion strategy try to focus on the manufacturing sector, which at the initial phase of their development was not their area of comparative advantage as they had in the primary sector. But for the import substitution policy, we can say that the whole emphasis is actually based on the requirements of the country and also on the vision of the policymaker, not the comparative advantage at all. The strategy of export promotion makes the country more vulnerable to external disturbances, and the adverse effects are felt more in times of recession or the crisis in the advanced countries. However, a country can achieve a certain degree of self-reliance with the import substitution policy. And in the initial phase of the development, particularly the countries who faces a massive deindustrialization under colonial repression, the import substitution policy was the most natural and optimal choice, we can say. But a mix of these two strategies would be more appropriate in the latter stages of development. And this is also true for from the infant industry argument, because under that argument we say that we protect the industry to make it more competitive and let it free in the world competition. And the South Korean development experience is such an example of using import substitution and export promotion policy in such an optimal way. So now we are coming to the conclusion, and in conclusion we can say that import substitution policy definitely helped countries to build their own industrial structure and also gain food security through self-reliance. Now, over time, government must focus on the competence of these industries. The incentives of the government should be linked with the efficiency achievements. Now, here we must say that after import substitution, we may not prefer a completely laissez-faire policy or the free trade policy, because even in the advanced world, they also protect their agriculture or industrial units till now with the various tariffs and non-tariff barriers. So, the critical point here is to free the economy from bureaucratic retrapism, corruption and rent seeking. So, at the same time, we can say that promoting export is another important and necessary next step of the import substitution. So, the success lies in finding an optimal dynamic mix of these two strategies. Neither import substitution nor export promotion in isolation can achieve the objectives of industrialization and a balance of payment stabilization.